Welcome to the Art of Dress. Today I'm very excited to share with you my work on hats. So thank you so much for coming and subscribing. In order to explain hats to you, I actually have to get into quite a few different aspects of hats because they are complicated in a way, like everything, but hats in particular get into artistry, they get into element of style, and they also get into style itself. So let's start with just the sort of prototypes of the 4 different kinds of hats. So the first kind of hat would be something that you would see worn most typically by an air style. This is Anais Molly, and she is elaborate gammon. That is an air style. And you can see her hat is unstructured, and this one doesn't even have a brim, but usually you have some kind of a small brim. The smallest brim, is what you would typically find in a hat for the air styles. The second kind of hat would be for the earth styles, and this is modeled for us by Rosie Huntington Whiteley, Refined Dramatic, and you can see that it is more structured. It has a brim, almost always it's kind of a fedora, and it just varies in size depending on the style, but this is the basic type. The third kind of hat would be a water style. And for water styles, this is elaborate natural Chanel Iman, and you can see very clean and sleek. Sometimes there's trim, sometimes there isn't, but this is the kind of hat that you expect to see or will most frequently see worn by water styles. And then the fourth kind of style and the fourth kind of hat are the fire styles, and you can see here that the hat is almost always trimmed, the brim is often quite large, and this is a really big statement hat because that's what a fire style is really all about, is the statement. Now, this isn't all there is to do with hats. This is just sort of a general starting point on what you might be thinking about for yourself if you had to go shopping for a hat. So the second and really important part to think about is the crown, and in order to understand the crown, I have to take you back to the Zodiac Wheel. And you've seen this Zodiac Wheel before, but this one is a little bit different. And what makes it different is that the true classic, instead of being in the center, is now moved to the outside. And now what you see is you can see a descending order completely from 13 to 1. It's pretty close to what was on the other Zodiac Wheel, but just with all the styles represented. So the numbers that are in those little circles are very important because, as you remember from before, the number tells you your weight of fabric, 13 being the heaviest and 1 the lightest weight. It tells you your scale of your design elements. It tells you the overall simplicity or complexity that you would expect from your style. And we already saw in prints last week that it tells you the size of your motif. And now today we're adding one more thing. It tells you the height, the crown, the distance of the crown, not in measurements, but just to say, okay, very large, medium, and so you get a feeling for it. So that's what I want to show you today, is what happens with your hat, starting at the top of your head down to where it would connect with a brim or does connect with a brim, and understand how that works according to each of the styles. Beginning with Chanel Iman, who, as you already saw, is number 13, the elaborate natural, a water style, and you can see this very high crown. But there's one other thing, and that has to do with your artistry. And I want to point that out to you because it's important in every hat you want to try for this. And if you don't have it, you might even consider, depending on how close you can get it, whether or not you want the hat. Because for an architectural like Chanel Iman, her forms as you remember, are two-dimensional and firm. And that means like a piece of, like a board, like a piece of glass. And so that flatness is what you want to see across the top of your hat if you are architectural. Second kind of hat is the second height of crown is Rosie Huntington Whiteley, and she is refined dramatic, and that would be number 12. And you can see that her crown is still quite high. This is her typical fedora. She is an earth style, but she is also harmonic. Now, harmonic forms are two-dimensional as well, but instead of being firm, they are soft. So this is artistry, working together with style for your hat. So your two-dimensional forms that are soft means that instead of having a completely flat top to your hat, now you want like a dent. It's as if it's like caving in a little bit, or a dimple. Even a dimple is enough, and that's what you see at the top of her hat. So that is typical for the harmonic. So number 11 in terms of height is Agnès Mali, elaborate gammon, and you can see from the dimple that she is also harmonic. Two-dimensional softened forms, so that makes the top of the head of the hat either pushed in or just not quite flat. So there you see. Number 10 is True Classic Alpha. Do this one first because this is the order. And in this case, she is wearing a typical kind of unstructured headgear that you would expect from an air style, but she is air and fire. So in the next version, in the next video, I'm going to show you her fire aspect, because those are pretty far apart. And another thing that's going on here is she has this softened form happening from the composite nature of her artistry. So composites are three-dimensional, not two, and they are also soft. And so that's why you don't really get the spherical, the totally three-dimensional spherical aspect that you would get from sculptural, but you do get this really softened kind of almost rounded, pretty rounded look. Number 10 is also Elle Fanning, and she is True Classic Omega. Now, in this case, her head is up, so you don't quite see how beautifully rounded the shape of her hat is, but it really would, it's like a sphere, and that's what you're going to be looking for if you are sculptural, is that, and sculptural, don't forget, the forms are firm, so you get this kind of a statue kind of feeling, as if you had the bust of a person right in front of you. So your hat is firm. So you see, hats really pick up on the qualities of your artistry much more so than your style. And so you really see a kind of firmness happening here in her hat that belongs not to the firmness of her fabrics, which are also firm, but more to the firm aspect of her forms, which comes from artistry. So in terms of height, now we have reached number 9. So coming down from 13, we're getting close to the middle. Still quite high, measuring here from where the brim connects, it's still quite high, but not as high as before. And again, you can see from the shape of the top of the head, this sort of opened out circular form, that she is composite. Now you come to number 8, and this is True Dramatic, which is Candice Swanepoel. And in this case, you can see that it's starting to lessen the height, but you're also getting this kind of a dimple pulled in at the back, but it's still affecting the top of her head so that it's not really spherical, it's this more softened, opened out shape. And the middle, number 7, and that's Refined Gammon, that's Micah Janelli. And here you can see the crown is decreasing, and also you can see that there's, just if you look carefully, there's this like a dimple at the top, as if she pressed it in, and it's holding its shape there, but it eliminates the sort of firmness of the flatness and becomes like a sort of variegated, wavy kind of shape across the top of her head. So now we have reached the bottom half in terms of height. And here you see Arlenis Sosa True Natural number 6, and it's quite soft. And now this is a really typical hat for an air style. She is an air style, and you can see that it is unstructured. It's usually called a bucket hat, unstructured, but it has a small brim, and it's usually very soft in its construction. So it's very, very becoming to her, but also very simple, as you normally expect to see in terms of an air style. So it looks amazing on her. And number 5, we're getting very close to the bottom now, Josephine Scriver, and she is refined natural, but she is the sculptural refined natural. So now what you're seeing is a really strong sculptural head. It's firm, her forms are firm, and so it's very spherical. And it looks really, really cute on her. So she is an earth style, but in this case, she's just wearing a pull-on hat, but it's still super becoming. And I want to talk more about that too on the next video, going back and forth between the styles of hats. Here we have Gigi Hadid, number 4. Did I say that Josephine was number 4? She was number 5. And Gigi is number 4 in terms of height. So Gigi has this is really interesting because you can see the dent. It's like a dent, a big dent. And that is what gives her the extra height above the top of her head, which is what she wants, because she's not wearing it totally pegged to her head. Although a pullover hat is worn pulled over and straight to the head. Now, when it has this kind of a turn up that at the bottom, or this ribbing that's differentiated, it's not quite the same as a kind of hat that is like I think they're called a cigarette hat or a pillbox hat, or any of those hats that are very, very contained with a really firm form, usually with no brim. And those are worn best by people they can be worn by other people, but they're worn best by people that are either composite or architectural artistry. Here we are again. And that is because their forms are filled in or contained, another way to say it. I also sometimes say closed. And so you get this feeling that it's like your head becomes this closed aspect, this almost like the sculptural piece of your attire, or very, very relaxed in the terms of air styles, but still finished. It's a very finished thing. There's no brim. And so it's much harder for a harmonic or a sculptural to wear that kind of hat, although they're really good with a veil. So you get there's always some kind of answer that works really well. When you reach number 3, this is True Gammon, again, Joan Smalls, and you can see that this hat is very kind of a water hat, and that is what she is, but the height of the crown is getting very low, and as you would expect from number 3, and also because she is architectural, flat on the top, straight across. Really, really cute. Number 2, getting so low now, Frida Gustafson. You can see that this is just like a beanie on top of her head, practically, just a little bit of space, and very fitted to her head because she is sculptural. And then last you have Jordan Dunn, number 1, elaborate romantic, very short crown, and also a very, very flat top because she is also architectural. So the next video about hats, I'm going to explain to you how the hat and the brim work together, because that's really how you move that's really important in terms of being able to wear different kinds of hats. Because if you have to find your exact height crown every time, it becomes almost impossible to find a hat. And plus you get a different look in your hats by wearing these different sizes from, different hat height, I could call it. So that's in the next video, and I'm looking forward to that, and I hope you'll join me. And in the meantime, thank you again for coming and subscribing, and please take care. you.